Most people who have worked seriously for 3 decades arrive at the final 10 years before retirement carrying a specific and very understandable belief about where they stand. The belief is that the trajectory is largely set, that the financial outcome of the retirement years is determined primarily by what was done or not done in the earlier decades, and that the final 10 years are a kind of denouement, a period for consolidating and protecting what already exists rather than for building anything genuinely new. This belief is not irrational. It has a surface logic that feels like wisdom. You cannot go back and change what happened in the earlier decades, so you make the best of what you have now. What this belief misses, and what I want to spend the next several minutes making specific and computable, is that the final 10 years before retirement are not a denouement. They are, in the financial mathematics of a complete working life, the climactic act. The act in which more of the final financial outcome is shaped than in any equivalent span of time before it, and in which decisions made with awareness of this fact produce outcomes radically different from decisions made without it. My name is William Grant, and the story I want to tell today is about why this is true. Why the arithmetic of the final decade is different and more powerful than any previous decade, and what it means for the specific decisions available to someone living through it right now. The case begins with a number that very few people in their mid-50s have ever calculated about their own situation. The ratio of what the final decade can produce to what all previous decades have produced. When this ratio is computed honestly, with real income numbers and real savings rates rather than theoretical projections, the result is consistently surprising to people who have never done it. In the majority of cases I have observed across 4 decades of practice, the financial structure that 10 intentional years can build is comparable in magnitude, sometimes exceeding, the total accumulated across the prior 25 or 30 years combined. This is not because 10 years is a long time in any absolute sense. It is because of a specific combination of conditions that converges for the first time in a working life during the final decade before retirement. That combination is what I want to examine carefully. The first element of the combination is peak income. In most professional trajectories, earning capacity reaches its maximum in the final decade of active career. The expertise accumulated over 30 years, the professional reputation established through 2 decades of demonstrated results, the networks and relationships that only long careers produce. All of these are priced at their maximum by the market, precisely in the period when the remaining time to use them is shortest. This creates an irony that most people feel but never articulate. The years of greatest earning capacity are also the years with the fewest remaining years to capitalize on that capacity. That tension is the central financial fact of the final decade, and understanding it as a resource rather than a constraint is the shift that makes the difference between a decade occupied and a decade used. The second element is the lowest competing demands of any period since early career. During the decades of family formation, career establishment, and the complex overlapping obligations that middle life generates, earned income was divided between multiple simultaneous priorities: children, mortgages, career development costs, the exploratory spending of a life still learning what genuinely satisfied it. In the final decade, most of these have resolved. Children are financially independent or approaching it, housing costs are stable, career development expenses are lower because the career is already at its highest expression. The lifestyle experimentation that consumed capital in earlier decades has produced its result, a precise and settled knowledge of what you actually want, eliminating the spending on discovery that preceded it. The result is that a meaningfully larger proportion of peak income is available for strategic deployment toward financial structure than at any previous point. The final decade is not just the period of highest income. It is the period of highest proportion of income genuinely available for building. The third element, and the one I find most consistently underestimated, is what I call the target clarity advantage. Someone at 55 or 57 who has lived enough adult life to genuinely know what they want from the decades ahead is working with information that a 35-year-old categorically does not have. The retirement they are building toward is not a theoretical future state. It is a knowable configuration of life that they can describe with specificity. What income level they actually need, what activities genuinely matter to them, what kind of housing will satisfy them, what the life they want actually costs, not as an aspirational guess, but as an informed estimate from someone who knows their own preferences after decades of living them. This target clarity transforms every financial decision of the final decade. It provides a specific, evaluable criterion against which each choice can be measured. Does this bring me closer to the precisely defined target, or does it not? That criterion does not exist with the same precision at any earlier stage of financial life, and its presence in the final decade is one of the most powerful and most undervalued advantages available to anyone in that period. I want to ground this in the experience of someone I worked with, named Winifred. Winifred was 56 years old when I first sat with her, a senior partner at a mid-sized law firm with 30 years of practice behind her and a financial position that she described with the lawyer's precision I appreciated. Adequate, undirected, and structurally not what her income history should have produced. She had saved consistently, had retirement accounts that reflected decades of contribution, owned her home substantially outright. What she had never done was compute what the remaining 9 years of her intended career could specifically produce if the convergence of conditions she was currently inside, peak partnership income, children who had finished university, housing costs reduced to near zero, preferences so well known that she rarely spent money on anything she did not genuinely value, was met with explicit, deliberate, strategic deployment rather than with the continuation of the financial habits that had operated throughout the prior decades. When we did that computation together with her actual partnership income and her actual expense structure documented from real account activity, the number that emerged represented a projected financial structure at 65 that was, in absolute terms, larger than the total value of her retirement accounts after 30 years of contributions. Not because anything spectacular was being assumed, because the combination of her current income level, her current savings capacity given her dramatically reduced expenses, and 9 years of compounding from a meaningful base created arithmetic that her earlier decades, with their school fees, their mortgage payments, their career development costs, their exploratory spending, simply could not have produced at any equivalent savings rate. What Winifred did with that information was methodical and, in its early months, not particularly comfortable. Comfortable was not the point. Effective was the point. A savings rate set at the maximum honestly sustainable, given her actual expense structure, automated and non-negotiable from the first of each month. An investment structure split between a growth allocation that continued building value and an income allocation that immediately began establishing the dividend-generating positions that would eventually produce retirement income without requiring principal sales. A deliberate decision to hold her lifestyle at its current level, which was already comfortable and represented everything she genuinely valued, rather than allowing the partnership income increases of those remaining years to fund lifestyle expansion that would have felt natural and was, in the specific context of the convergence she was inhabiting, financially costly in a way she would not have been able to recover from. The outcome, reviewed at our most recent meeting, was described by Winifred not primarily in financial terms, but in what she called decisional freedom. The financial position that 9 years of deliberate deployment had built gave her, at 65, options that were genuine rather than theoretical. Whether to retire completely or to transition to a consulting arrangement on her own terms. Whether to maintain the current home or to sell and redirect the equity into additional income-generating structure. Whether to assist her adult children financially or to build a philanthropic direction she had been considering for years. These decisions, presented as choices rather than as responses to constraints, were the product of 9 years of using the most productive financial decade of her life with the intentionality it deserved. The question I want to leave you with is direct and intended to be uncomfortable in the useful way. If you are currently in the final decade before retirement, can you state, with precision, not with approximation, what the convergence of your current income, your current expenses, and your remaining years is arithmetically capable of producing if deployed with maximum intentionality? Not the inspiring version of that number, the honest version, calculated from real figures. If you cannot state that number, you have not yet begun to use this decade as the resource it is. You are occupying it. The calculation takes an evening, and the clarity it produces about what is possible, about what the cost of each year's delay actually is, about exactly what you are building toward, and whether the current plan is adequate to build it, is the most useful single piece of financial information available to you right now.